Your first speaker of the 2021 CityJS conference is Debbie, who is beaming in live from Palma de Mallorca. Debbie is the head developer advocate at BIT, and in this session, Debbie is talking about components. More specifically, Debbie argues that we should be considering the long-term reusability and maintainability of the components that we build rather than just trying to get features out of the door. It'll help with long-term developer happiness. Don't forget, you can post along on Twitter using the hashtag CityJS2021, as well as use the comment section wherever it is that you are watching along today, whether that's Gather Town, YouTube, or somewhere else. I hope you enjoy this session. Debbie, it's over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tony, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to CityJSConf for having me here. So we're going to talk about building components in Harmony, building with Bit. Yeah, I've got my Harmony t-shirt on. Woo! Let's get started. So a little bit about me. My name is Debbie O'Brien. I'm the head developer advocate at Bit. You might have known me previously as the developer advocate at Nuxt. And I'm also a GitHub star, a media developer expert at Cloudinary, a Microsoft most valuable professional, a Google developer expert, and an Auth0 ambassador. And you can follow me, Debs_Brian on Twitter. I live on Twitter, so come and see me on Twitter. And I love this photo, right? This photo is actually from one of the last in-person conferences that I attended. One of the reasons why I love it the most is because this conference was on a cruise ship in Antarctica. I know, right? In Antarctica. So this was me actually working on a cruise ship in Antarctica in the waters back when life was normal. I'll get there again soon, but definitely recommend it. When we get back to normality, go to Antarctica. Really cool. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to cover feature ownership. So why you should own certain features, why teams should own features, and how different teams manage those different features, those different scopes. I'm going to talk about reusability, how we should build thinking about like scaling and reusability so we can build much better applications in the long run. And design systems, how the design team should be responsible for design, because you don't want to make me responsible for design because everything will look awful. And thinking about components first, like how we should focus on more than one possible end product. Like when we're building, think about the bigger picture, think about the future, think about what else we could be building in the long term. And that's something I want you to kind of like start thinking about. So first of all, I want to talk about my dad. So my dad is a carpenter, and he is amazing. He builds furniture, he builds houses. He's built like most of the houses that I've lived in, and we have like moved house a lot. Seriously, it's crazy. But yeah, he's very, very talented, and he built this. This is incredible. This is the furniture he builds. And what does he do? He goes in there and he measures from that door to that window, and he makes this amazing furniture made to exactly the measurements of your walls. And it's incredible, right? So this is what he does. And me, I'm a developer, right? So I build things too. Because, I spend my whole life being brought up on building sites. And literally, instead of doing homework, I was like, hammering down floorboards and literally laying bricks. Like, no, seriously, yeah, it's manual labor, child labor, terrible things. But yeah, so I had this kind of from an early age, I wanted to build things, but I didn't want to, build houses or build furniture. I wanted to build websites. So this is the website I built for my dad, and I know it is amazing. I know I built this like probably more than 10 years ago. I don't even remember. Back in the time when you couldn't do all those cool things with the web. And yeah, I mean, the site is still live. It's probably broken. I actually need to take it down because my dad's retired and all. But yeah, but I built this website, and it's cool. So this is what I do, right? So, what's the problem? My dad builds great furniture. I build great websites. What's the problem? Life's great, right? The problem is that things are made to measure, like I build that website specifically for my dad. My dad builds that furniture specifically for that one room, that one house, that one user. Therefore, it's not scalable, and it's not reusable. Like, think about that piece of furniture and you move house, you can't really like take it off the wall, right? And if you wanted to like make it bigger, extend it, you're really going to have to call my dad, or you could call my brothers, which is great because that means they have loads of work and they get money. So that's cool. But it's not the best solution. And it's not made with components, right? Now, okay, you might think my website is made with components, and some of them are. And I'll tell you a story actually. because I built that website for my dad. It's in PHP. And yeah, so it's not actually in components. But then, you know, my brother came along and he decided to start his business. And he's like, Debbie, can you build me a website? So Ken O'Brien Carpentry was born. Okay, great. That's another website out. And then my younger brother decided to go into business and he's like, Robbie O'Brien Carpentry, another website. Now I have 3 websites to manage. Right. And then my 2 brothers decided to go into business together and they said, Debbie, we're now called Blue Interiors. Can you make us a website? And I went, go away. Because, like, seriously, I've got to do another website. And they're like, can you not just use what you've built and just like recreate? And I was like, not really. Because although I made it in components, those components are not easily available across those other websites. So it's like I didn't make it in components because I never thought about the fact that maybe, you know, when I was building my dad's site, maybe my brothers would then go into business and maybe they'd go into business together. And we don't think about the longer picture. And that's the problem. So what's the solution? I have a solution for you all. This solution, are you ready for it? Are you ready for the solution? It's called IKEA. No, seriously, IKEA is the solution to all our problems. I mean, how many times have we had to, like, you know, just buy some furniture? IKEA solves all our problems. But no, seriously, what do I say when IKEA is the solution? IKEA thinks about components, right? And IKEA, when they build their furniture, they're thinking component first, and that's what I mean. So, for example, they don't think towards one end product. They don't build that one piece of furniture, right? They build components so that you can build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or how many different types of furniture and different types of things. And you can just piece it together and you can extend it and you can, depending on the size of your house, depending on where you want to put it, right? And they're thinking not towards one end product, but towards the possibility of many end products. And that's what we should be doing in software development. If we do that, if we think that it's possible that that one website could be 10 websites in the long run, you know, we just kind of like make things that are scalable and we make things that are reusable. And basically, the way to do that is to think in components. If we start thinking about components first, we'll end up being able to create many applications much quicker and much better and be able to scale and reuse them. So that's the plan. That's what I want you to do today. Let's see if I'm going to have you by the end of this talk thinking in components. Let's see. But first of all, what exactly is a component? So we all know what a component is. I mean, we should do, but let me just show you from the dictionary. A component is a part of a larger whole, right? It's a piece, it's a bit. I work for bit, it's a bit. It's an element, it's a unit, right? That's basically what it is. It's something that is, you know, small and is made to make something bigger, and it can be as small as you want. You can have a big piece, a large piece, a small piece, an extra small piece, etc. Now, if I was to ask you, what is a component? How do you think of a component? What would you first think of? And one of the things that always comes to people's minds as software developers is a button, right? So a button is a component, and yes, that is exactly what it is. That button on your site is used across, you know, many pages, many applications. We all use buttons. Buttons are cool. I love buttons. So yeah, we think about a button, but a component is much more than a button, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But yeah, a button and a shelf. If we're talking about IKEA, a component is a shelf because, you know, you can have that one component and that shelf can be used in a bookshelf. It can be used in another type of piece of furniture. It can be used in many different places, right? So a component is not just a React, a Vue, or an Angular or a Svelte component, because that's what we think about when we think components. We think frameworks directly, but a component can be a UI primitive. It can be services. It can be middleware. It can be serverless functions. It can be applications, backend services. It can be anything. And I want you to keep that in mind, that a component, I'm going to show you lots of like React and UI examples because I'm learning React. But I want you to think that it's, you know, you can apply this to any other thing, right? To backend services and micro front ends, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Why should teams own features, right? So why should we have a team that owns a specific feature? What do I mean by a feature? I mean, for example, a shopping cart, right? So the shopping cart team should own that shopping cart. And, you know, the back end part, the front end part, the, you know, everything that composes and makes that, that feature, they should own it. Okay, that's what I want you to think about. Now, why? Because if they own that component, that feature, it helps them just to build mastery and it allows autonomy for them, right? They can, you know, they don't have to worry about like the design of that because that feature is owned by someone else and they're owning this feature. and they communicate like through APIs. So your backend front end team can communicate through backend APIs, but owning the feature. So you got separation of concerns, but you're working together. You're building together, but you're also staying independently at the same time, which is really, really cool. And at the end of the day, we want to own our feature, right? We want to be able to ship that, take it from start, take it to end, and ship it and be responsible and own it. So that's what we want. In this example, for example, we have like the hotel catalog. This is the catalog team, and they're in Sydney and Australia, right? And then you've got in New York the infra team, and they're basically like responsible for the base components, and the catalog team is responsible for the hotel catalog, and they're able to work independently, but they're building together, so they're able to come up with this awesome page, right? So that's what they're doing. They're building separately, but yet together. In IKEA, the same, right? You know, they own these are like Billy, for example, is one like feature, like, you know, and Best is another one. So they're one team, that's another team, and they're able to like, you know, build those components, build those separate, and yet they are able to use, you know, other things if they wanted to from, you know, the design team, etc. So why should components be reusable? I mean, of course, components should be reusable, but you know, why should they be reusable? Why should we care? You know, why should we not just build our applications and just ship them out there as soon as possible, as fast as possible, and not care about reusing things? Like, obviously, we need to reduce duplicated code. Now, how many of you out there have got like 25 product cards in your code base or have had that in the past? Because me personally, like, yeah, all the time, the product card is the worst one. We just keep building that same component because, you know, we're not aware that the other team has built one. We end up building one, then we have two, then we've got three, and it keeps going on. And that's really difficult to maintain. We want to make maintenance easier. We want to be able to develop faster. Now, if you're going to start building in components and think in components, it might slow you down because you're thinking in a smaller kind of pieces to end up with a bigger piece. And sometimes it is quicker to just like, you know, code along, bang, 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 and get the application out there. Yes, that's faster, but then you're going to have the problems in the long term. So if you kind of like slow down at the start, you will then be able to make development much faster in the long term because you're able to just reuse pieces to build whatever you want. Like, you know, build again and again and again and again, many different things. And sharing is caring, right? We all need to share these days. Sharing is caring. So let's start making things and sharing them with our other teams, with other departments, etc., so that we can just reuse those. So yeah, like, I mean, if we talk about a reusable component here, you've got that search bar. That search bar is being used on that desktop application. It's also on the web, on the mobile application. The button there is used, and you can see like they're, you know, slightly different, and they're just being reused. They're being maintained by one team. That team owns that, and another feature is just using that, and that makes it a reusable component in a very cool way. Just like in IKEA, you know, actually, this is really cool. I was playing with this the other day. You can actually build in IKEA this, right? So I know it's ugly. I know I was playing, but yeah, I can take the components and I can reuse them. So you can see that like wooden brown square component, right? I'm reusing that. And then the shelf component, I'm reusing the shelf component then to put the shelves in. And this is a fun tool to build your furniture in IKEA. So I definitely recommend you playing with it. But yes, in IKEA, the same. We reuse the components so that you can build those applications, those furniture in this case. So why should components be themable? Well, I kind of just showed you how I had slides in that IKEA example. So it's the same thing, right? We want our components to be themable so that they're easier to reuse. Because we want to just be able to change something very, very simple across your applications, and then you're able to use that component. If you don't theme it, then it's all going to look the same, right? And you don't really want it all to look the same. You just want to reuse things and be able to simply change the color, the styling, or whatever to make it reusable across many different applications. So you got one component, but many different options. And then you can easily change branding, which you might say, do you want to change branding? Companies are changing branding all the time. So yeah, changing branding is important, and supporting multiple themes. We've all gone crazy into this dark mode. Dark mode is the way forward, right? So we all have our websites now in light mode and dark mode and even high contrast mode. And that's something cool. And we all want to be cool. So this is kind of important to do. And also multiple brands. So, you know, you might want to have like white label brands and many multiple brands. So having your components be themable is just going to make this so much easier for you. So again, like this button, right, it's themed, and you can have like, you know, a little bit different here on the rounded edges. One is a little bit more square, the other is more rounded. We got a change in color. And then that button is used in your application, and you can theme it, and then you can use it in different ones, and the black button can be somewhere else, and etc. etc. With IKEA, I mean, they have the same, right? So you can go and you can change the color of that one component, which in this case is the door, and you can change that to be the beige, the gray, the red, etc. etc. So how do we discover components, right? Now, this is a big issue because, I used to work in other companies, big companies, with many different teams, and we don't always talk to the other team, right? We don't know what they're doing. And nowadays, I mean, we're all working in different offices, different countries. Like, we're not communicating as much. It's very difficult for us to be able to know what that team is doing because we're not having the coffee break and having oh, you built a product card today. Oh, I'm building that tomorrow. Oh, can I use your product card, right? So that kind of conversation has gone. We need to be able to discover components easily. And if we're building components that are shareable, we want people to know they exist. This is our issue. How do we solve this? Well, we solve them by sharing components to the cloud. I'm going to talk about the Bit cloud because that's where I'm working. And if you share your components to Bit, for example, they're in a cloud and they're easily shareable across all your teams and enterprises. You can make them public. You can pay a license and make them private and have them only available to your team. You can even self-host it if you want, if you don't want to use the Bit cloud. Everything is possible, right? Another thing you need to do is name your components correctly. And naming is hard, right? So we're just going to call product card, right? But maybe thinking about what the functionality of that product card is. Is it a scope product card? What is it? So naming it will really help things. Organizing your components as well. So organizing it into into scopes so that you have design, UI, base. It could be shopping cart could be one. And if you organize it properly into these kind of scopes, it will just make things easier to find. And labeling, right? You could label your components. In Bit, everything is searchable, so that helps. And adding kind of little labels to make it easier to find things is always helpful. So yeah, in Bit, we have our components up here, and you can kind of preview it as well, which is really helpful feature. So at a kind of glance, you can search. You can search for something, and then you'll get whatever you searched for, you'll get a result. You can search across the entire public open space. You can search across your particular team or organization. And then you can see how the component would be rendered. You can see that GitHub link, for example. That's a cool component. I want that exact component. And then you can explore that a little bit further. So being able to find your components easily, yeah, this is a great solution. IKEA obviously do it similar, right? They have a website and they kind of, tell you what the component is about, the name of it, and they show you a picture of it and show you that it's easily, they label it, etc. So same thing. So how do we improve consumers' dev experience, right? So we want to build our components so that other teams in our organization or in the world or whatever we want are going to use our components. So how can we improve their developer experience so that they're able to use our components much easier in a nice, easy, friendly way? So we got to think about how the component will be used. So this is kind of yeah, obviously, you got to think about it. But do we actually think about that? Because sometimes we just build, right? We're great at just building. Let's just build. But if we stop and think about how exactly is this component going to be used? Who's going to use it? Who can use it in the future? Think about that first. We should also document our components. Now, Bit gives us some great tools to help you with this, but documenting your components is really useful because your future user might not know what you were trying to do and might not be able to get into your head. So documenting things is really important. Creating compositions so you can see what that component would look like, and with the different states, with different kind of props inside, with different ways of doing things. So creating visual compositions so they can easily see things, really important. Tests as a documentation feature. What does that mean? So if we create tests that actually tell you, what's going on in the component, that's basically documentation, right? So that's kind of really, really, really important to do. Live component playground is something else we have in Bit. It's really cool. So you've got this little playground. It's kind of almost like a code sandbox kind of thing, right? Where you're live playing with something and you can modify the text. So say you wanted to use that component. I'm going to use the button example. I know some people don't like just focusing on the button example, but the button example, for example, if you could change the text in it, you can see how that button would look like with a longer text, with a different icon, with a different whatever. And we can use the live playground to do that. So this is an example, right? Again, it's the button. And we can have here, this is with a theme and it's got the style of min height 90. I could change that and put the height to something else. I can change the width and make it wider. I can change the text and make like, shorter text, longer text, etc. And I can see how that button would look like live. So I can play with it before I even decide that that's the component I want to use. Now that's kind of pretty cool, right? And you can see the compositions that have already been created for me. I can have a primary button, a secondary button, a normal button, a primary loading button, a secondary loading button, a normal loading button. Like, this is cool. Just from using this component, I can have all these variants. Like, this is great. And you can see the properties that I have, right? Because it's documented. I've got like the elevation, the importance. I can choose none or normal, ghost, muted. And it's explaining me, right? The elevation is going to style the button with a shadow and click effect. So this is really cool. This is how you should document your components. And then that component is just going to be so super reusable across for any person to use. And it's going to be a much better developer experience. And yeah, I mean, IKEA does the same, right? They kind of, document it and they compose it. This is composed of those other components, and they show you how it's used. One of the great things that we can do as well is we can compose one component from many components, and we can show you what it looks like. So I just showed you the button component, and now we have a hero component that's using the button component. Actually, it's using two button components with different styles, like so the primary one, and I think it's a secondary one, for example. It's using a title component, and it's using a description component. And this component is composed of many components, and you can again see what this is like. So you could take that hero component and use that in your application and say, that's exactly the hero component I want. And you could go into the live playground and play with it and test that out as well, which is kind of really cool. So we're not just showing the small little tiny components, we're showing like composed components, like super composed components. And one of the great things as well in Bit, like you can see, this is bit.dev, right? And you can see we've got like the overview, the compositions, the tests, and the dependencies. And I like this because it shows you what your component is depending on. So that hero component is using the button component, it's using an image, it's using a dots loader component. And you can see how everything is, pieced together. And that's kind of really cool. So you know what you're kind of using in your code base before you start using it, which is just great. So how should we reuse components, right? Simple question. How do we reuse them? Well, we just, think about components as services. So think about this component is a service to something else, right? And we think about that way. If we integrate the components together to form like more concrete components, so like in that hero component, we're integrating things together, and then we're sharing those concrete components for other teams to use. And this is things like, like the base components, making sure we have like one team that's creating that. So we're not recreating those. And then we're sharing the concrete components that are making up of that base component, for example. And then we're not reinventing the wheel, because like, you want to see my website, don't look at my website. It is a mess. Like my hero component is not a hero component. It's like, yeah, I need to seriously start thinking about components and improving my website. Otherwise, I'm just going to be reinventing the wheel. I'm just going to like, yeah, don't go there. So yeah, in this example, we have like this card component. We all have card components. Do you know how many card components I have in my application? But yeah, we're breaking it down into smaller pieces. So you got the star as a component, the price is a component. That's kind of small, like little components that are just being composed then to make that card component, to make that, card content component in this case. And the hotel card then is like using that card content component. And that's what we want to try and do, right? We want to try and, break things up into smaller pieces and then compose them together and make things just super, super reusable. And what IKEA does is the same, right? If you've ever bought any IKEA furniture, you've got a bag of all this stuff, right? I always kind of wonder, this little kind of wooden thing, right? Like all my furniture is being put together, this wooden thing. Like my dad taught me with hammer and nail, right? And things stay together, they do not fall apart. And we're building things with little kind of like pieces of wood. But my point here is that the Besta or the Billy team, they don't build these little kind of wooden things and these screws and bolt things. They don't build any of that, right? They use that from another team. Another team is responsible for that. And then they just use them in their in their team, right? So when you buy that furniture, you're always going to get that bag of stuff that's built from that other team. So you don't want to be responsible for all those little things. You want them to just be part of the product. So yeah, this is my actual piece of furniture. This is in my house. I'm so glad I cleaned the floor before I took that photo. But yeah, I built this, as you can see, like from the previous designs, I changed mine and used like the components to make like the black doors and the wooden at the beige at the top, right? And that just means that if I painted my walls black, I mean, I mean, I don't even know why I would paint my walls black, but imagine I painted my walls black, then I could basically change that component from being a black door to a white door, right? And I don't have to change that entire piece of furniture. I don't have to change everything. I can just change that one door, or in this case, two doors, because otherwise it'd be a bit strange, but and that's what we want to do. We want to be able to take pieces out and reuse pieces. And that's what we want to do. So how do we trust our components? Because we're sharing these components with other teams. And, I don't know if they're going to do a good job or not. So how do I know if that component is going to be okay or not? Well, tests, right? And I know you're all going to say we don't have time to write tests, or they're not going to let us write tests in our company because they just want us to ship development faster, right? But yeah, by creating tests, you're going to create trust in your components, and it is going to, think about that component's going to be reused across many code bases. So creating tests is really, really important here. Now, another thing is making the tests easily available. And if you can have the tests available that you can see the component before actually, downloading code, before actually using it in your application, you can see that that test is running and passed. That's power. So simulations, dependency testing, like testing your dependence, making sure that that hero component, that button component is also tested. It's not just the hero component, right? And that's what we need to do. So in BIT, for example, you can actually see the tests. You can go into the workspace UI, click on the test, and you can see that that button, for example, is going to tell you it should render the secondary, it should pass the class name, it should use the variation HTML attribute, etc., etc. And you can see those tests, and you can see that they've passed, and you know that that component is, safe to use. And IKEA does it by building the furniture, right? So IKEA basically takes that piece of furniture, takes all those components, builds that piece of furniture, takes a photograph of it, puts it in its catalog, and it knows that it all works together. So that's how they do it. So how do we think about component composition, right? So imagine you have this component, you need GraphQL, you got variables, and you got loading, you got data, you got all this stuff going on, right? So you've got a full kind of a component that you've got to build. So how do you think about making this component? So you got to think first about props, right? And I'm the kind of person that just builds, and my website was just built, just me building. I didn't think about props. So I would write static text in there. And then I'd reuse that component. I was like, oh, now I've got to put props in so I can reuse it somewhere else. Think about props first. Think about state first. Think about root. Think about styling. If we think about these things first, we'll basically be able to create our components much better because we'll just think about them correctly rather than just build and then change things. So just like IKEA, right? So this, hinge for the door, when they're building those components, when they're building that door, they think about the fact that that door needs to open and close. Therefore, it's going to need a circle there, cut into the wood so that that hinge can go in there. So they have to think about that first. They don't build it and then go, oh, now how is it going to open and close? We didn't think about that. No, they have to think about that from the start. So why should we think in components? I know, right? It's a very interesting question. Why should we think in components? I hope that you've already come to the conclusion, but let's go over it. So to build more scalable products, that's what we want to do. We want to be able to build products that scale, that we can, reuse products, build endless applications much easier, reuse our components across various projects, various applications, various repos, various code bases, various teams, and deliver faster in the long run. Because if we do that, we should be able to build applications very, 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 very quickly. And we want to develop in harmony, right? We want to just have fun, not be in these code bases that are a mess and have to struggle to work together. We want to develop together in harmony. And that's what we want to do. And, that should be easy, right? You've got a UI library, you publish it to the cloud. And then in project 1, you're installing it. In project 2, you're installing it. And then project 276, you're still installing it, right? And that's what you want to be able to do. Just like in IKEA, right? They build those components and look at all the amount of different types of furniture that they're able to build from that one component or from that, piecing together those components. And like you see in my one, look at the one in the corner there that they have the black doors going all the way up, right? They have a completely different piece of furniture to what I have. And that's what we want to be able to do. Completely different piece of furniture composed up of different components. So welcome to BIT Harmony, and we are literally in public beta. It is completely safe to use. It just means we're in beta because there's a lot more features coming. So I want you to all go try it out and have fun with it because it is very, 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 very cool. You can share components across applications very, very easily. We have support for React, React Native, and for Node at the moment, but there is support for more coming. And remember, so you've got your component. You can use that in the UI library repo, in the web app repo, in the mobile app repo, in the new app repo, etc., etc. And you can share front end, you can share back end, and you can share modules with Bit. So, I've been showing you UI components, I've been showing you, React kind of stuff, but I want you to think that this is possible to share microservice, middleware, whatever you want to share, it's possible with Bit. So are you ready for it? That is my question. Are you ready for it? I hope you are. I'm ready for it. I've been like componentizing my world right now, and it's seriously changed my way of thinking about things. So it's seriously, yeah, like just start building with Bit and you'll start to figure out that this actually all makes sense. That's it. It's bit.dev. Go there, check it out, and just have fun. Reach out if you have any problems at all. We're going to be there to help. And if you walk away from here and think, right, I don't want to use Bit, then that's fine. That's not the objective of this talk. The objective of this talk is that you go away thinking in components, that you go away thinking about building better, more scalable, and more reusable components so that you can like create better applications in the long run. If you walk away from this talk just with that, I will be happy. And if not, go and use Bit and have fun and test it out. But seriously, thank you very much. You can follow me, LinkedIn, Debbie O'Brien, and you can follow me on Twitter, Debs_O'Brien, and YouTube, Debbie O'Brien. And yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Debbie, thank you very much for that amazing talk. I think it might quite possibly be the perfect start to this year's CityJS conference. Hopefully everybody watching along at home will be taking a step back from their projects and thinking more about the reusability of the components that they're making rather than just trying to push them out the door as quick as possible. Please join me in giving Debbie our first round the world round of applause. Debbie's Q&A session will be starting over on GatherTown any moment now, so please head on over there and pose your questions to Debbie about components, reusability, and anything connected to that. Please do let us know what you thought of that talk on social media, and don't forget the hashtag CityJS2021. And if you're watching along on YouTube, please do let us know how you're finding these talks as we go along throughout the day in the comments section. Debbie, what a fantastic talk. Thank you very much for delivering it as part of this year's conference. A season pro, and I think the perfect way to start off this year's conference. Would you agree?
Thanks, Tony. You're too good, too nice.
So we've got a Q&A session now, and I think we head straight into it. We've got a couple of questions that have come in already, and I'm sure some more will. So let's set the context here. You've covered a lot of the value of how components work and how they work with different teams in practice, which is very, very helpful. Can you talk to us more about the challenges in pitching component use to teams for the first time? Very interesting question.
It certainly is. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems is that a lot of people don't have the bad experience that I've had, right? When you've had to work with teams who haven't been working that way. So you've got all that legacy code, everything's mixed together and stuff. And how do you then try and change people's way of thinking? And that is not easy, right? Because people are used to doing stuff. They've done it this way all their lives. Why are you going to come in and tell me that it's different? And I've been that person, right? I'm the person that walks in and basically changes your whole code base and drives everyone crazy. And then they see the possibility of it, right? But it's very hard. I would say like to actually create proof of concepts and show them, how quick and easy it is to then rebuild something, to build something new using that. So if you kind of take it down to a smaller scale and show a possibility, right? Test it out and then come, because if you tell someone something, they're just going to go, I don't believe you until I see it, right? So show them it, show them how it works, and then go in and then challenge them and say, right, in your way, how long is it going to take you to do it? And, if they win, then maybe our way is wrong, right? But they're probably not going to win.
I like that. So essentially throw down a gauntlet to your line manager to prove you wrong.
Yeah, pretty much. I did that with Tailwind CSS, for example, when I was using Tailwind and I wanted to use it across applications and stuff. And the team wouldn't believe me that it was like the right way to go forward for building quick ways of getting websites out there and stuff. And the only way to do it was actually just to build with it and then kind of say, right. And I told them what I did as well. This is really important. I said to them, I'm going to give you 2 weeks, right? You're going to tell me today you don't like it. You're going to tell me it's not going to work. You're going to tell me you hate it. This is a terrible idea. Great. Fine. But come back in 2 weeks and tell me that same thing and we won't use it. So if you give people time, then let them come and get used to it. Give them 2 weeks and say, you're going to build in components. You got 2 weeks. You're not going to like it. Fine. 2 weeks time. Let's have another discussion on it after you've done something with it and used it. And then we'll decide if it's the right way forward. Because you want your teams to be happy at the end of the day. You don't want to just be telling them what to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. So take the mountain to Muhammad rather than trying to take Muhammad to the mountain, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, there's a parable in there somewhere, isn't there? I had a question, and it kind of feeds off of what you've just said there. Are there any arguments actually to be made for not reusing components? Really good for creating MVPs, but where would you not be reaching for a reusable component?
Yeah, pretty much what you said there. If you want to, like, creating a MVP of minimal viable product, right? Something very, very quick that you want to show to someone, that you want to just build to, I don't know, a quick win for a project, then yeah. And we at an agency as well, we had to deal with things that, this has to be delivered like right now. So if you need to do that without components, then that's great. But imagine you're an agency that already has all these components already created, right? So now you've got to the stage where you've already got everything. You should be able to create that MVP very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But starting off, it's going to take you time to build up that. Now, obviously, like there's open source, and there's a lot of bit components that are open source that you could use. So you could build using open source components, and then eventually, have your own system set up so you've got everything ready and you're able to then do things quicker. But at the start, definitely, it might take you a little bit longer to get to that stage where you're able to ship very, very fast. And maybe that's a good time to kind of say, right, I'm in the transition phase, right? But you should be able to build even MVPs very, very fast if you have the right architecture, the right structure from the start.
Okay, so there's no excuses for not making reusable components in the long run, essentially, I think was what
Yeah,
you
I
were
just
saying.
didn't say that, but yes.
You say it much more diplomatically than me. So we've got another question here. It's coming from Andre. How does Bit compare to Storybook.js? Andre can observe better adoption of the latter in their projects. So
yeah, so you can use Bit with Storybook, right? Because Storybook is allowing you to see the component and composed. And so we have that kind of similar features and stuff, but we have a lot more. So things like versioning of your components, we're able to see the version. One of the cool things that I like, for example, is take your component. So I'm going to take that hero component, right? And there's a bug in it. You need to fix it for some reason, or they've changed something. You can actually bring it into your application, like by importing it. It's like magic, right? So like when you're installing your npm package, right? But you're bringing it in and you can make changes to it. So imagine if you could go into your node modules, make edits in your node modules, and release a version directly from there. Because that's kind of, if you're thinking about the way it's being done, right? It's kind of powerful, right?
yeah.
So you're bringing it into your application, you're seeing it there in your application, you're able to see it in your local host, you make your changes, you kind of see this works good, you export it, you create a new version. And then this is even more powerful. And this is a new feature coming very, very soon. Then you're able to kind of see how the dependencies are how it's updated and stuff. You can see that version passes, and that component is used in many other applications, components, etc. You're able to see how it's affected. So it ripples down to see all the effects of that new version. And then that person who owns that kind of, component, whatever, says, yes, I want that hero in this, app component, or I don't want that version, or I do, or whatever. And you can kind of see all that. So it's much powerful. So Storybook is great, and I love Storybook, and you can still use Storybook with Bit. You don't need to use Storybook because we have kind of similar features, but obviously Storybook is also cool. And if you want to use it, that's perfectly fine. They work together. But Bit has a lot of other features that Storybook doesn't have, if that makes sense. So it's not competition. I mean, put the two together, use it in harmony. It's all cool.
Oh, we're developers. We want a bit of competition. We need to create some when there's not natural competition. We just make it up, don't we?
Yeah, I know. Well, there'll always be other ways of doing things, right? So it's not really competition. It's just like maybe you want to do things that way, but can you easily share your components across different user bases from Storybook? I don't know. I haven't used it enough to be able to test that out. I just know that with Bit, I'm able to import it into my Docker source website. I'm able to import it into my Debbie.codes website. I'm able to import it into another website. And if I own the component, if I have admin rights, I can modify it, change it, and create new versions. And it's very powerful. It's kind of cool. I have superpowers. Woo!
You got superpowers. I like that. Any technology that gives us superpowers has got to be a good thing, right?
Exactly.
So we got one last question, and we're running out of time, so this will have to be a quick answer. Are there any common problems or roadblocks you see teams encounter when they first start using components?
Yeah, so the hardest thing is like that you haven't got a kind of a base set up. So you're going to start building and using components, and like the first thing I did, I'm building my website and I kind of go, where do I start, right? Like you need a starting brand. So I would suggest using like, a base UI library that's already created, and then build your components with that rather than creating all that whole base component yourself. And maybe there's a theme already created and maybe you could use that or just like extend it. So I think kind of having the minor building blocks already created for you will help you get things done faster until maybe you create your own design system and your own, because design system is hard work. That's the hardest thing, I think. So that would be probably, yeah, the hardest thing. Design, try and use that, and then like build your components from that.
Who'd have thought it? Design is the hard bit.
Yeah, like kudos to those designers. They do a great job.
I know they do, and I think they're underappreciated by a lot of developers. But
Yes,
that's a
yes.
different
Maybe,
discussion, I think.
yeah, like let's not go there.
That's a
That's
rabbit
why we
hole.
need to work in harmony so we can see each other and we can see what the design looks like and they can see it rather than having to see it in a code base. And that's, I think, the cool thing, that designers and developers can all kind of collaborate together. That's really, really important.
Nice. I think any moment now, Giz is going to pop into my ear and give me a 2-minute time check. Is that right, Giz?
Oh.
It's wrapping up now. I've got one last question.
Go, go, go.
Tabs or spaces?
Tabs. Come on. It's like one tab and then you like have so many spaces, right?
There we go. Debbie, thank you very much for joining our Q&A. Enjoy the rest of the conference,
Thanks,
and I'm sure
Tony.
we'll see you around again. That's it from
All
us for
right,
now.
take care. Bye.